Good boy, Tucker.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome.
Work smarter where you want.
Consistency is key.
And remember, if it's not in Redtail, it never happened.
This is learning at its most fun.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another Thursday weekly webinar. My name is Jonathan Maddock. This is part 2 of a 3-part series on business development. This week, we're going to be talking about systematically applying your sales cycle. Really, what we're going to be talking about is how we can take that early sales process and go ahead and put it into things like workflows and opportunities, and in our use automations to go ahead and trigger that. So to go ahead and get started, I am going to, there's a lot to cover today, so I'm just going to kind of jump right into it. So to get started, first, what we're going to go ahead and do, our main goal is to use our workflows to guide us through what is going to be done as far as when we should be reaching out to the client, not the client, the prospect, right? You only have so much time in the day, so we should only be spending so much time kind of reaching out to these leads or these prospects to go ahead and gain, hopefully to gain their business. Now, if you followed along with us last week, we had talked about the status in the category and kind of how we can go ahead and set up our database to best fit the avenues that we're going down, right? Looking at a status, looking at a category combination, and very quickly understanding, oh, I know exactly where they're at within that sales cycle, right? So just to kind of review, we had lead is just a name and a name and contact information, right? We haven't reached out to them yet. Once we make that initial, start having that initial dialogue, we're then moving them to a prospect, right? So very quickly we can understand, okay, a lead is just a name and a phone number. Prospect is somebody we've had a conversation with. Now, I'm not going to go too far in depth. If you did miss last week, I highly recommend going back and taking a look. And just did a good job of kind of summarizing everything that we need to do. And then this week, we're going to go ahead and see how we can apply it. Now, what I want to do first is go ahead and start talking about a workflow that we're going to be taking a look at. So to access our workflows, we can click our name in the top right-hand corner. We can go to manage your account. And then we're going to go into workflow templates. Now, if you've attended a Redtail University, or if you've attended some events back in the other webinars, in years past, we've done this before. So it is somewhat of a review, but I want to just make sure that everybody's aware of kind of setting up a workflow like this. So what this is going to be is going to be a prospecting cadence. It's just really kind of guiding us through, hey, when should I be touching the client? Obviously not. I don't want to be spamming them, but I also want to make sure that I'm, at the forefront of their attention, right? So what you'll see here is we just have that. It's just a cadence. We have a first phone call, first email, and it's going to be due on the day that we start this workflow. Now, as we go through, we have so many days after that initial interaction that we're going to go ahead and guide us through. So, over 12 days, we're going to be reaching out to them, and it's going to be over 12 days, we're reaching out to them 4 times. Now, for somebody who, is maybe doesn't have as much resources to put towards something like this, you might be spreading this over a longer period of time, or maybe there are some really big fish in the sea, and you're like, hey, I want to actually, this is just not a typical prospect. I actually want to go ahead and see if I can nurture this a little bit longer. So maybe you expand out this cadence. Whatever you decide, I just want to use this as an example. You are then going to have some sort of 2 examples here, right? You have client is interested or interested in a meeting, or client is not interested, right? That's going to very quickly tell us, hey, we've reached out to them over the last 12 days, we've reached out to them 4 times, and we've gotten no return, right? So let's go ahead and mark them as cold, and we're going to just go ahead and push them off and just, drip them on a monthly or quarterly basis, whatever you decide. Or if the client is the prospect is interested and they're like, hey, I would love to go ahead and meet with you guys. I was a referral from somebody and I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Then what you're going to be doing is you're going to be moving down to the client is interested step. And so you're going to be using your outcomes to dictate where you go within the process. Because at any time you're reaching out to the client or any sort of interaction that you're having, you immediately can jump down to the client is interested, client is not interested, or I'm going to be moving on to the next, interaction step. So you will go ahead and you'll see that we have outcomes through all of these. And then right here, when we get to this, the last interaction, there's really only two ways that we can go. Client is interested or the client is not interested. Now, again, I just want to use this as an example. I do have this as a PDF that I will go ahead and post after. So you'll see this once it's posted onto the help desk, you'll go ahead and see this. But again, I really want you to take this as an example and to apply what's going to work best for your office, right? Maybe you have a longer period of time, maybe a shorter period of time, whatever it is. Just go ahead and know that we're using the workflow to guide us through at what point in time we should be reaching out to them after so many touches. So once we have that set up, we are then going to go ahead and I'm going to show you one more workflow because what we're working towards in that last workflow is scheduling that first meeting. Whereas if we go ahead and schedule that meeting, we want to have another workflow that allows us to do some sort of follow-up off that initial discovery meeting, right? So what you're going to see here is we're going to have the target date is going to be the day of the meeting that we schedule. And then we're going to go ahead and have so many follow-ups along the way until we decide, hey, we had the initial meeting, we converted them to a prospect, but now they've kind of gone cold on us. Well, then we can track that with our workflow. And then hopefully they move on to onboarding, or unfortunately, maybe they just go cold on us and then they're done. So again, the initial one that we showed is going to be for us to receive that, schedule that first meeting. And then the second workflow is for us to do the follow-up after that initial meeting. So we have two workflows here. Now, one thing that I want to point out is that we are going to be creating an opportunity once we have that initial meeting. And I just want to point that out because once we get into the opportunities, I'm going to go ahead and touch back on that point as well. So our workflows are created. We're looking good. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure that the CRM is working for me and that I'm not having to work for it. So what I can do is I can systematically use things like automations to go ahead and say, hey, within my sales cycle, I want to be able to make one or two actions within the database that I'm already going to be doing anyways, right? So I want that to trigger the workflow. So for these examples, what we're going to be doing is we're going to head into the automation templates under the manage your account. And I don't have these created today, so I actually want to spend some time going through and creating those. So the first one that we're going to go ahead and do is going to be based off of a contact being created in the database. So if we gather a new lead, whether it's a referral, whether it's from a radio program that we're doing, or maybe it's a lead that is automatically pushed into our database, whatever it may be, we are then going to go ahead and say, anytime we go ahead and have a contact added into the database, I want to link a workflow from a template, okay? And the template that we're obviously going to be using is our prospect workflow number 1. So if you aren't necessarily familiar with automations, there are definitely some great videos on the help desk to take a look at those. But what I want to go ahead and make sure that everybody's aware of is that as it sits right now, anytime a contact is added, and it's going to automatically link this workflow. But there might be a time when I create a contact that I don't want this workflow to go ahead and trigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a condition. And this condition is going to be based off of the event type that you're selecting. So if I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, anytime I add a contact, the condition fields are going to be based off of the contact. If it's anytime I create an activity, the condition items are going to be, an activity items. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and say status needs to equal to per lead, because again, I just have a name and a phone number. I'm going to add them to the database first, and then I'm going to start working that lead. So I'm going to add that condition. And I could leave it at that, but I'm actually going to go just a little bit further, and I'm going to go ahead and add a condition of category, because I want it to be, just right off the top, I want to say anytime I've added a contact into the database that has a category of lead and I misspoke there. Anytime I add a contact into the database that has a status equal to lead and the category equal to warm, I want to go ahead and trigger this workflow. So it's a little bit more specific to what we're going to be doing here. Now I'm going to say lead added to database. So we'll go ahead and say that. You can use the automation description to give it a full, like, hey, anytime I add a contact, I want it to do this, so that everybody's aware of what that automation is going to do. And you'll see that in the automation dashboard. So let's just read through this one more time. Anytime I add a contact, I want to link a workflow from a template, and that template is going to be the prospecting workflow, but only if they have a category, a status of lead and a category of warm. Now I'm going to go ahead and create this automation. And before I go ahead and show this in real time, I'm also going to add one more automation, and that's going to be the one that is for selecting the second or scheduling that meeting, which is also the second workflow. So here, this one is going to be based off of an activity creation, because like I had mentioned earlier, I'm trying to have the CRM work for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have these actions that I'm already going to be doing naturally. I want those to be the reasons why these workflows trigger. So if I go through the first workflow and the client is interested, or the prospect is interested, I'm going to create an activity for them to either come in, or I'm going to give them a phone call, or whatever it may be. That's up to you on how that works. But for our example, it's creating an activity because they're going to be coming into the office. So for this one, I'm going to say schedule. So anytime we schedule the prospecting meeting, the trigger event is going to be activity added. We're going to do this action, and we're going to link a workflow. The workflow is going to be our prospect workflow number 2. Now, again, as it sits, anytime I create an activity, it's going to link this workflow. That's not really all that effective for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to add conditions, and you'll see again, the condition items are going to be based off of the activity. So we're going to say activity type needs to equal to, and for this one, I'm going to go ahead and say, you could do, I have a prospecting meeting. I also have appointment. I try to use system defaults as much as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and select appointment. I'm going to add that condition. So activity type has to equal appointment. And I'm going to add one more layer of conditioning, and that's going to be the activity category. It's going to equal to, and I'm actually going to go down to where it says prospecting. So this is an appointment that's a prospecting appointment. Now, I just want to go ahead and go back to the very, very beginning. There's a reason why we did this as a series, because part number 1 was all about adjusting those database lists, making sure that you have everything established. That's so important, because if you don't have your activity types and categories and statuses and categories all set up appropriately, this really is going to fall flat. So if you're sitting here going, hey, you know what, I would love to take advantage of this, but I don't really think my statuses and categories are up to par, pause this video, go back and take a look at the one we did last week. That's the first part in the series. Get that all set up, and then come back to this video, because a lot of what we're doing is building blocks. And this really goes for all automations and all, applying them to the database. We have to make sure that those lists are set up appropriately so that we can use this effectively. So now, if I read through this one last time, I'm going to go ahead and add it. Anytime I add an activity, and I'm going to link a workflow from a template, but only if appointment and prospecting are the type and category. So now let's go ahead and create this automation. So just to quickly review, I have 2 workflows created. I have 2 automations created, and they're going to trigger based off of a contact being added with a status of lead, a category of warm. And once I've gone through that initial workflow, I'm going to schedule appointment if they want to move forward. And that is going to trigger the second workflow, which is going to be based off of an activity type of appointment and activity category of prospect. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and see this in real time. I'm going to head back to the Today page, and I'm going to go ahead and create a contact. So again, this was covered last week, but we're going to go ahead and just do it one more time. And I'm going to go ahead and say Steve Weston is the first name and last name. This may be something that we have a support staff adding to. So whoever is maybe your data entry person, they're going to be the ones to just add this information in. We have a phone number, so we're going to go ahead and give it a phone number. It's, so we'll go ahead and add a phone number, and that's their mobile phone. If we have an email, great. If not, no worries. We'll just go ahead and put other, and we're going to go ahead and put Steve at And now this is going to be the really important part, because we have to select the appropriate status and category for this to trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and say status needs to equal lead, and the category needs to equal to warm. So as long as those conditions apply within that automation, when I create this contact, this should immediately apply that workflow. And it will. So we're going to go ahead and create that contact. Now, you will see we've created a new contact, Steve Weston. We have a phone number, an email address, and what you will see, look at that. It's a nice looking active workflow that is already applied to the contact. So this is something that I also like to show just kind of as more of a very quickly going ahead and doing your prospecting, is you can scroll all the way down to the very bottom within a contact, and you're going to go ahead and very quickly see that we have workflow tasks right down here at the bottom. So I know that I need to make phone call number 1, and I need to send email number 1 right from the contact record. Now, I can go ahead and just do that. I have a phone number, so I can dial and boop, 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 boop. Hello, oh, I got a voicemail. Okay, well, if I got a voicemail, I'm immediately gonna go over to the notes tab, and I'm gonna go ahead and add a note, called Steve, left voicemail for, call number 1, right? Something like that. We can go ahead and give it a category. We'll go ahead and use prospecting again. Now I've saved that note. Now I haven't really done much except for add a contact in the database, and I've initially called. Then, depending on what you're doing, I just want to show capabilities of the CRM. You can also go ahead and click the email option, and you can compose that email right from the CRM. And again, to take a look at email templates and things like that, I'm not going to cover it today, but if you have the same sales cycle every single time, you can go ahead and select a prospecting email number 1, and you send out that initial email. Now, once those are done, whether you use the internal system or you use your Outlook or Google or whoever's hosting your email, you can then scroll down to the bottom, and we can say, I've made that initial phone call, or I've made that initial email. So we can either complete that. Now, going back just a second, I will say, if you aren't able to gather an email right off the bat and you only have a phone number, you certainly can keep the same template and just go ahead and remove this task from the workflow. So we could click into the workflow itself. And rather than saying that I actually sent this email and giving myself bad history, I can just go ahead and very quickly in the workflow section, just hit delete task like it never existed. It won't affect the template, but it will indicate to me that, hey, I don't have a phone number and I only made I made that initial call. So then we could complete the step. And then I'm going to select the outcome and say I've left a voicemail. I'm going to move on to the next step, which is the interaction number 2. So we'll go ahead and complete that. And now you'll see that we're going to move on to, interaction number 2, which is make phone call number 2. It's just a follow-up from our initial call. So that is going to be this workflow. I want to get back into his contact record. So we'll go, nope, excuse me. So now I'm back here. Now, this is going to be on an individual basis, right? What you're seeing here. You're going to see that it's 3 days out from today. So we have, on the 11th is when we're going to be reaching out. That is a Saturday. So we'll probably reach out to them on Monday. We can push it a day or two. But then what we're going to go ahead and do is I want to show you a way for us to see this, from a database perspective, right? Because if I'm an advisor, I want to be able, my goal with this is to be able to say, hey, who do I need to reach out to that is a prospect, and when should I be reaching out to them? Well, if you're using this, this process that I'm discussing, you can very quickly see that those workflow tasks that are going to be coming up might be whatever initial call is. Maybe it's call number 2 or email number 3 or, the first interaction, whatever it is, you're going to see them on your workflow tasks to do today on the today page, or you can head up to the top right-hand corner from the today page and you can go into active workflow tasks and you can see everything that is a prospecting, item, and you can go ahead and, take care of it right here. So again, our goal of this is to go ahead and make sure that we know when we should be reaching out to the prospect, how we should be reaching out. Was it a call, an email, whatever it may be? And again, if we're not even the ones that are going to be inputting this data, we can just sit back and have our support staff go ahead and, into those contacts, let the automation do the work of triggering the workflow. And then as the advisor, all I'm doing is just waiting to see who I need to call and who I don't need to call, right? It's just that simple. So that is going to be the workflow portion. Now, let's go ahead and get back into, let's go back into Steve real quick. And I want to show you what would happen if Steve says, yes, I'm loving what you guys are doing. Let's go ahead and, move forward. Okay, well, if that's the case, then what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and I'm going to complete interaction number 2. And rather than going to the third interaction, I'm actually going to skip it and say client is interested in a meeting. So I'm going to say, let's just say the scenario is he called us back. He said, yeah, you know what? I love what you guys were saying. My referral has said great things about you. Let's go ahead and move forward. You say, okay, great. How about coming into the office? He says, that's awesome. What day works for you? And he says, August 15th. Perfect. 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm an early riser. So let's do 8 a.m. Okay, great. So what we're going to go ahead and do, we should already be doing this same action, right? So I'm going to create an activity in the database, and I'm going to go ahead and say for Steve Weston, I'm going to say, discovery meeting. I'm going to go ahead and put the date for the 15th. I'm going to unselect all day. He said that he's an early riser. He wants to come in at 8 a.m. Misclicked, so we'll go at 8 a.m. And we'll give ourselves an hour. Now, if we go back to what our automation said, we needed to have an appointment available to us. It was the type. And then we had the activity category was going to be prospecting. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I select those appropriately, because if without it, it's not going to trigger the workflow. So I'm going to leave myself as the attendee and everything looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and create this activity. Give it a quick little refresh, and you'll see that that one active workflow now turned to 2, okay? And again, I can't stress this enough. We're doing exactly what we should be doing even if we weren't using workflows, right? We should be creating the contact in the database, and we should be creating the activity to schedule ourselves that we know that the client is coming in. So we're not doing anything out of the ordinary, no extra steps here, but we're just allowing the CRM to work for us. So now I can scroll down. You're going to see that prospecting workflow number 1 is still active. We're going to update the category, and we're going to go ahead and schedule the client meeting, which we just did. So that's done. And we're going to update the category to now. We're going to change it from lead to prospect, and we're going to go to category to hot, because now we know that this client is, hey, they're coming in. They're full steam ahead at this point in time until they say otherwise. So we'll go ahead and update that. Now you'll take a look down here at the bottom. We've updated that so we can complete the workflow, and we can say contact status category adjusted. We're going to mark that workflow completed. And now we're going to be working towards meeting number 1. Now, if you are familiar with automations and workflows, you're going to know that the target date for our workflow is going to be the day of the activity that we created. So we said May 15th was the day that the client was coming in. Well, on May 15th, I need to prep the conference room. I need to go ahead and take a look at the, update client meeting notes once the meeting has happened. But then you'll also see down there at the very bottom, and I'm actually going to click into the workflow because this is important. This is really important to us, is you will also see where it says create opportunity in Redtail. Now, the reason why this is in the second workflow and not the first is because we do not want to create an opportunity until we actually know what we have to gain from the prospect, right? I'm not going to go ahead and create an opportunity when I have no idea what the opportunity is. I'm only here to go ahead and say, hey, we've had a discovery meeting. Client says that they have accounts being held over here. They have a 401k. They have they have some assets over here. They have a house. They have maybe 2 houses or whatever it may be, right? And those are the things that we have to gain, under our management. Well, okay, now I can very quickly and say, well, what is the opportunity to Steve Weston? Well, it's about 1 million under assets that I can gain from him if he comes on board. That is the opportunity. The opportunity is not, Steve Weston wants to talk to us, right? That's not an opportunity. That's just a lead. So I want to make that very clear that we're going to go ahead and create this opportunity once we've had the discovery meeting. So we can go ahead and click through everything. So we'll click through, and I'm going to leave just this one undone. I'm also going to go ahead and go into my workflows real quick. And I am going to Steve Weston. I'm just going to edit this real quick because I do like to go ahead and say prospect meeting number 2, but I'm also then just going to go ahead and put his name after the end. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and update that. So now I have, even though it says it here, I also want it to be in the title. Now, once we start getting that traction going with communicating with the client, we're then going to head over to the opportunities, and we're going to create an opportunity for what we have to gain from Steve. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new opportunity, top right-hand corner. We're going to say Steve Weston. And again, there's a number of different, ideas or kind of ways to go about this. I probably would recommend something along the lines of like the business type or the business line that you're going to be doing. So if it's life insurance, you put life dash the person's name. If it's going to be investment, you put investment, dash the person's name, so that way you kind of very quickly, you can organize all of your opportunities based off of investment, life, 401k, whatever it may be. So for this one example, I'm going to go ahead and go with investment dash his name. We can then give a description. So we can say, Steve has accounts everywhere. Let's to bring them all over to us. He has, I don't know, let's just make up a random number. We'll say $500,000 in accounts. And again, I'm just trying to do this for time's sake. So you'll probably give a little bit more detail, maybe put in, what type of, if he does have insurance, right? Does he have a 401k? Does he have any other IRAs that we should be, notating? Whatever it is, we're going to put as much information in the, in the opportunity section that allows us to say, hey, this is what we have to gain in the opportunity. So this is new business because he came from a lead. And now we'll go ahead and create that opportunity. Now we're going to go into the opportunity. We can then link a contact, and that contact is going to be Steve Weston because he's the prospect. And we can fill out all of this information. So next steps, hey, this is what we need to get done to move forward within the deal, the case, whatever you want to go ahead and say, stages, things like that. I'm not going to go too heavily into opportunities because within 2 weeks, we are going to have another video that is going to talk through every single aspect of the opportunity. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to tie up a couple things that I want to make a point here. What I would also do, and what's great about opportunities, is you can link a workflow and you can also link an existing workflow. So we already have a workflow that is for our follow-up, right, from our initial meeting. Well, now what we can do is we can link that existing workflow, and that workflow that we have is prospecting workflow number 2, Steve Weston, right? So now I can go ahead and link that, and once it was all set up, we would go ahead and take a look at something like this. We would have a linked workflow. And if you needed to, you could click into the workflow and you would see whether it's completed or if you're still in the process, whatever it may be. The reason why I like linking a workflow is because the opportunity is for us to put all the information about what we have to gain in the deal and all the kind of the numbers. Yet the workflow is going to guide us through the process, right? This is how long we've been reaching out to them, right? This is where we need to go moving forward. This is also a great way for you to put, your onboarding workflow. So if you have an onboarding workflow, we use the opportunity to guide us through, hey, we're moving through the sales cycle, yet the workflow is guiding us through onboarding, getting everything over, sending it off to our BD or sending it off to our custodian, whoever it may be. You can go ahead and use the linked workflow section to guide us through the process, yet we have the opportunity section to house all of that case or deal information. Now, one thing I do want to note here is that we are not going to, stop using notes. We are still going to put notes on the contact record. So we want to make sure that we're still putting similar information within the notes section. So if the client calls back in and says, hey, I mentioned that I had, I looked at my balances and that's actually more than I expected. I thought it was 500,000, but it's actually, I forgot there's an extra account for 250,000, right? That is a conversation. You're still going to be using the notes section, but you're also going to be updating the opportunity as a best practice. So again, to go ahead and recap, we are going to make sure that we have a workflow available to us to kind of monitor how often we're connecting or touching the prospect. We're going to use automations to allow us to systematically go through and say, hey, I'm going to be doing this action in Redtail, so I want it to then trigger the workflow. Then once all of that is set up, we're going to be doing those actions so those workflows then trigger. And then once we start getting those conversations going, we're going to be using opportunities to go ahead and gauge what that deal looks like, what are we going to be doing during it, and house all of that information.
Thanks so much for joining us today for this particular session. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 800-206-5030, option 3 for support, or just shoot us an email over to support@redtailtechnology.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day.